Welcome back. Well, let's continue to dig into Kay's search for her Kentucky ancestors. Now, Kay, there's been a lot of information, and we asked you whether your ancestor, Andrew Mefford, who settled just up the Ohio River in Lewis County, was related or possibly descended from Flatboat George Mefford. So logistically, this connection actually does seem feasible. So what did your research find, and where did you get stumped in your search?
Well, that's a good question. I started researching for Andrew after my father passed away because I had never done any ancestry, and I had gotten some information from a relative of his in Florida who had been researching this for years. And I've always come up as far as Andrew, and I can never get any farther. But it's just really been like a brick wall.
And sometimes it's hard in those historical documents. You get conflicting dates and information, right. Certainly.
Yeah, on his census, one time he's one age, another time he's another age, and one time he's from Ohio, one time he was born in Kentucky, and on his daughter's death certificate, it has that was born in Holland.
Oh. Well, that's interesting.
I know.
I'm not sure we have a Holland in our area.
I don't think so.
Well, we're going to get to the bottom of that and try to maybe get out some of those weeds and maybe get to some solid information, certainly. So our genealogy experts also found that researching Andrew was also a challenge, so you're not alone, certainly there. So while he had settled in Lewis County, he was not originally from that county, and we uncovered several instances that actually showed years of local migration to Bracken and Mason counties. He also lived a few years across the Ohio River, of course, in Brown County, Ohio, an area that we're all familiar with and easy to get to. Based on the document trail, we believe that Andrew was likely born somewhere between 1819 and 1822. It's unclear because the Kentucky records available to prove parentage were very few and far between. During this time period, births and deaths were actually not recorded in Kentucky, and census records only listed heads of household names, so it rendered much of the population nameless. So, Kay, does any of that sound familiar to you?
Yes.
Okay, so part of the problem, right, in all of the research that a lot of us run into. After looking at many candidates who might be your ancestor Andrew's father, the family's migration patterns, tax records, they brought a couple of men into focus. So Samuel Mefford, who was George's son, and Henry Mefford, who was John's son. Right. So with these two candidates, we track their location, tax records over time, household profiles and census records, which included the age of young male children in their households. And as both men had at least one son within the right age range with your ancestor Andrew, and both lived in a location that matched some of Andrew's varied birth locations identified on his later census records, this meant that Andrew actually could have been the child of either of these men. So we're going to dig a bit deeper into the Mefford family history by beginning actually with John Mefford, who chose to settle in Ohio after migrating down the river with his brother, Flatboat George. Right? So John's will identified two sons. So Kay, can you actually read the names from the will?
The will lists their names as George and Henry.
Okay, so have you discovered these two men in your research?
Yes.
Okay, very good. So all of this is aligning with some of the things that you have found. Great. So John Mefford's two sons, George, not Flatboat George, right? We have common names, right, throughout all of this genealogical history, and Henry were both initially viable candidates for Andrew's father. So we ruled out George rather quickly because only Henry consistently had male children that fit the age of Andrew actually over time. So going back to the original Flatboat George Mefford, he and his wife Melinda, wait for it, had 13 children. Wow, right? And they all survived to adulthood.
Yeah.
Which we hear in the history books is like uncommon, right?
Right.
But 13 children, that's how your family got to grow so large in that area. So unfortunately, Flatboat George died in 1814 without a will, which is often referred to as intestate. So this made proving the historic accounts a little bit tricky. So just how were we going to prove all of Flatboat George's heirs, including the many suspected sons? So that's the billion-dollar question, right? So we're going to find out right after this commercial break.